presentation, so you'll be able to see it then. Okay, Chris, next slide. So you may be wondering, I don't think you will be, because I think pretty much if you're following the news at all, you know why this is a hot topic. But in general, why would we be talking about I-9s? The number one reason I didn't even put on the slide, because I think it's so obvious. The obvious reason is legally, we are not allowed to hire and employ anyone who is not authorized to work in the United States. That's the law. The I-9 is the document where we prove that we are doing our best to comply with that law. So I-9s, it's always been an important topic when you talk about HR for an organization, because the penalties are very expensive and they add up, because if you have an audit and they start looking at your I-9s, they charge you a penalty for each mistake that's on your I-9. So it can add up. Obviously, just paying attention to the news, there's a lot of increased scrutiny under the Trump administration. Previously, for the most part, I personally didn't worry a lot about my nonprofit clients being audited, but all bets are off in terms of where we are now because of the increased scrutiny on immigration. So the possibility of audits and even a raid has gone up, and we know that that's possible. We are hearing stories about audits and raids, particularly from the friends we have who are attorneys, and they're hearing about it. So we know that that has increased. But the fact is, for years, it's been our experience that most organizations don't do their I-9s correctly. And so that puts you at risk if they are not done correctly, if you should be audited, or if you should have ICE show up on your doorstep. So that's why we're going to talk about it today. We're going to go through it thoroughly to talk about how to do I-9s correctly, how to comply with the law. Chris, next slide. So if you start digging into immigration paperwork, it can be a little daunting. So let's talk really briefly about what's expected of you. Obviously, number one is that you don't hire someone who is not authorized to work in the United States. Beyond that, what the law requires us to do is to make sure we complete those I-9 forms in a timely and accurate manner. We're going to talk about both of those. What's the timeline, and what does it mean that it's filled out accurately? We're also required to perform due diligence on the documents that are provided to us. So we need to use our best effort at making sure that those documents are legitimate, that they're ones that we can accept, and that there's nothing that looks off to us about those documents that might indicate that they are not correct, that they are forged. Okay. We are also required to follow up on temporary work permits. Temporary work permit is somebody who is only has a permit to work in the United States for a period of time. And so when those work permits expire, that worker has to get a new temporary permit, or a lot of them are probably working on getting permanent resident alien status. And so then they would have a new category they would fall under. So we have to follow up on those. We will talk a little bit more about what that entails and how you document it. And then we are required to, having done those I-9s, to maintain them, keep them in a file, and make them available if we are audited. Those are the things that we are expected to do. Chris, next slide. The good news is, what we are not expected to do is become an expert in all immigration documents. No one expects that as an employer, you're going to go through the handbook on I-9s and learn about every single document that's out there. And there are a lot of them, and they are confusing. So we're not expected to be experts. We are expected to do our due diligence in terms of making sure that the documents we accept are legitimate, that they are not expired, and that to the best of our knowledge and as we look at them, that we do not see any signs that they are not legitimate documents. That's what we're required to do. Okay. Chris, next slide. So I'm going to turn this over to Chris. Chris is going to actually walk us through the I-9, the different sections, and what it means to fill it out completely. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Carpenter. I'm senior HR consultant with 501 Commons. Been doing HR for a long time, longer than I'd like to admit. But what I'm going to go through now is I'm going to take you through the actual document itself and show you how to, what parts that we have to fill out or we have to make sure that we get filled out, and then what parts that the employee fills out. All right. So first part is we have two sections that have to be filled out by every employee or for every employee. Section 1 is filled out by the employee. Section 2 is filled out by the employer. Okay. There are also two supplemental sections, and they are for different things that can happen. Like if you have a person that has a document that expires. Claudia was discussing work permits. Some work permits, the temporary ones do expire, and we would have to get new ones. So one of our supplements does that. Another one of our forms is if somebody, if you have like a translator, like for instance, have somebody that is reading the document for you. Maybe you have somebody who doesn't speak English and somebody had to translate the document for them. So you would have to use a supplement to verify that person as well. All right, and we'll discuss that a little bit more in detail as we go. All right, so this is a full I-9 form completed correctly. Okay, you'll notice that all the fields are put in. Even down here on list B on section 2, you'll see list B and C are completed properly with the type of document that you have, expiration dates, numbers that are supposed to be in there. In this case, a Washington driver's license number. You'll also see on the bottom of the form that it was actually signed by, well, it's that last name, first name, last name and first name of our person that verified, what their title is. There would be a signature in it. I just put signature representative in this case because I didn't want to have to sign it. And then today's date is when you actually saw the documents, and then it gives us the name of the organization and the address of the organization. So that's a full I-9. Now, I want to go over them a little bit more in detail for you and give you a little bit bigger blow up view. This is something that the employee completes. This is one of the big things that a lot of people miss is employees don't complete this on day one. This has to be done on day one of employment. All right. This part that the employee completes has to be done. Okay. So make sure that they're using their full names. One of the things that we see, like a person like me, my name is Chris. Everybody calls me Chris. But if you ask my mom, my name is Christopher. Okay. So if your name is, if you're using a short version of your name, you cannot use it on the I-9 form. You have to use your full name. You also have to use your middle initial if you do have one. And for people that have changed their names, make sure you add that in the other last names used. If you've ever changed your last name, make sure you use that in there too. Okay. If you haven't, then just leave it blank. The only thing you can really leave blank in this top section is the other last names and the apartment number if you're not in an apartment. So if you just have a regular, street address that doesn't have an apartment number, you can leave that blank. But other than that, it is not a good idea to leave any of these blank. And, a lot of people try to leave the email address blank or the phone number blank. You need to have those filled in as well. Okay. Make sure that those are filled in. And then right below that is one of the most important parts of this whole form is what type of person are they as far as in relation to their ability to work in the United States. Are they a citizen of the United States, which is the first block? Are they a non-citizen national, which is the second block? Are they a permanent resident? That's the third block. And are they just a non-citizen, but they are eligible to work in the United States? If that's the case, you click that fourth block. Now, one of the things about this is if you use the fourth block on this, you have to have one of the numbers below, and it gives you a really good list of things that you should have. Either a USCIS A number, or the Form I-95 or I-94 admission number, or a foreign passport number. And you have to have country of issuance as well if you put that in there. Okay, so that's all on like the foreign passports. It would be on anything that they would have that you would be able to use as a validating document here. And then make sure, here again, this is a big one that a lot of people miss. Employees, even though the signature line says signature employee in, nice big letters and a nice big area, people miss that. Make sure the employee signs that document and make sure they date it with the date that they were hired. Okay, or today's date, which also should be the date that they are hired. Okay, so we want to make sure that that's all complete. All right. And once you complete the first section, they will give that to you, and hopefully they will give you to either one of two things, or one of three things actually. They will either give you like a passport or something like that you can use in List A. Now, I want to explain to you what the difference between List A, List B, and List C are. What we're trying to validate is a person's identity and their ability to work in the United States. Those are the two things that we are trying to make sure that they have. So in List A, any document that's in List A, and I'm going to give you, there's a list that we have in here, and it also comes in every I-9 you would ever print out. There's a list. But one of the things in the list is a U.S. passport. Those are one of the things that proves the ability to work and your actual identity. Okay. So if you don't have one of those List A documents, you don't want to use one of those, we can use List B and C documents. Now, the difference is the List B documents only verify identity, and List C documents only verify ability to work. So we have to have either one List A document or a List B and List C document. So List A can be all by itself, List B and C have to go together. Okay. So in this case, in this person, they had a U.S. passport. We filled out U.S. passport, the issuing authority is Department of State. Then we had the document number, and then we make sure we put the expiration date in there. Now, guys, a little hint on the expiration dates here. One of the things that once upon a time, back in the olden HR days, when me and Margaret and Claudia all remember, we were able to take expired passports and expired driver's licenses as long as the person's names matched. It was fine. That no longer is the case. We cannot take expired documents any longer. Documents have to be up to date. Even if they expire tomorrow, as long as they're up to date when you have them, you can list them on here and it's fine. Okay. And all of this has to be done no later than 3 days or 72 hours after they're hired. So if they're hired on the 1st of the month, you want to make sure that stuff is done by the 4th of the month. Okay. You want to make sure you get that all taken care of. All right. If the employee cannot provide these documents, it's a problem. It's a really big problem. Now you got two choices. If for some reason somebody fails to bring these documents in a reasonable amount of time. Okay. First off, you can give them a little bit more time. You can say, you know what? Okay, you didn't bring it in the 3 days. I still can have you bring it in, but I need you to bring it in as soon as possible. The problem with that is, if you were to get audited, there's still a chance that the USCIS would actually fine you for not having that done at the proper time. Okay, so you're trying to be nice and give your employees some time and everything else like that. It could actually cost you some money down the road if you're not careful, if you do get audited. So sometimes not a good idea. Now, your other option after that 3 days is gone is you can terminate that employee. That is actually a valid termination reason at that point. Okay, so that is up to you how you want to do that and what kind of chances you want to take financially. Okay, but it's not against the law to take those late. It's just, it is something that they will fine you because it is now considered an error. Okay, it's considered an error. All right, now the rest of this page is really simple. After you get all the list documents.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Can we have a quick break so the interpreters can switch, please?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. We're switched. We can see each other now. Thank
Are
you.
you guys switched up? Okay, good. All right. So the rest of this document is pretty simple. All you have to do here again is you put on the bottom of the form, there is a spot for the last name and first name of the person that is validating the documents, right? That should be somebody from your organization, usually an HR person or a somebody in leadership, and then it's going to ask for the title of that person, which is in this case administrator, could be HR manager, HR generalist, whatever it is. All right. And then you need to have a signature. And what you're signing in this, and for those people who are going to be filling these out, what you're signing is that under penalty of perjury, you have looked at these documents and according to you, they are valid. All right. That's what you're signing. So make sure that you have looked at everything and that everything is valid. Now there's going to be a spot that you're going to write in the date of the first day of employment for the employee. And then right under that is going to have today's date. Those dates need to be within 3 days of each other. Okay. If they're not, that's where the errors come in and that's where it becomes a problem in an audit. Okay. So make sure that we have checked those driver's licenses, social security cards, whatever it is, make sure we've checked those within 3 days. That's the big key to this. All right. Now, here again, I've kind of gone over this, but I want to kind of hit it one more time. Column A is one document, right? It proves identity and ability to work in column A. Column B only proves identity, and column C only proves ability to work. So if you have an A document, it's good by itself. If you don't have an A document, you have to use a B and a C document together to prove both. Okay. That's one of the big things that people miss is that they get one document or they don't get enough. So make sure you do that. There is a full list of acceptable documents included with every I-9. So if you forget what they are, don't worry. There's a list. All right. And there's the list for you. All right. You see that it's pretty long. List A has a nice long list. List B has a nice long list. List C has a nice long list. So there's a lot of documents you can accept. One of the things that people forget is that they can actually use a school ID. Like if you hire somebody that's in college, or maybe you're hiring younger people that are still in high school, they can use their school ID to validate their identity. All right. So just make sure that you're looking at this list. So if they don't have a driver's license or they don't have an identification card, there are other ways to validate those things. Okay. So don't think that's the only way. All right. Now there's some additional pages. There are a couple of supplements, as I said before. Supplement A, and I didn't put a picture in here because it's a big document. It's a big looking document. It's actually not very hard to fill out. But Supplement A is a translator or preparer certification. So if you had somebody that was helping a person, maybe they didn't write really well, so you wrote it out for them, or maybe that they don't speak English very well, so you translated the document for them, because this document does not come in Spanish or any other language. This document only comes in English. So if you had to translate it for somebody, then you would make sure there's a section on that supplement form for the person, the employee, and then there's a section on there for the actual translator. And that translator information is very important, so that translator has to sign off as well on that. Okay. Now, supplement B is for recertification or rehires. So if you were to recertify a person's document, right? If there's a document, because there are documents that have to be recertified. If we have to recertify a document, you would use this document to recertify it. All it is saying, yes, I saw the new document, right? Kind of like you did on section 2. It's kind of the same thing. It's just on now a supplement, and then you take that supplement and you staple it to that I-9 form, or you keep it in the same place as that I-9 form. Okay. We do a separate recertification with every document. So if that document is recertified 3 times while that person works for you, make sure you do a recertification document for each time that needed to be recertified. Or if you're rehiring somebody. So if you rehire an employee, like let's say an employee worked for you for a year, left and went somewhere else for a little while, but said the grass is not greener over there, so I want to come back. Okay, so they come back to you. You don't have to fill out the entire I-9 form. All you have to do is do the rehire recertification supplement B. Okay, and then that would be okay. Sometimes there's sometimes where if there's one that has been lost, you just fill out a new one, right? But hopefully you still have their old one. Just do the recertification rehire. All right. Now, I put up some of the documents. This is not all of them. I just put up a couple of documents so that you could see what they look like. And I wanted you guys to see what the temporary work permit looks like, or the temporary work visa. It's called an employment authorization card when you see it. That's the one, that's the main one that has to be recertified. That's the one we see the most often. Now, it's not the only one that has to be recertified, but anything else, there are other places to look for lists of those documents. But this is the one you'll see the most, is for recertification, is this employment authorization card. All right. And then there's passports and driver's licenses. We don't need to re-verify them. Even if they expire, it doesn't matter. We don't have to re-verify them. The only ones that we re-verify are the ones they require us to, which is the employment authorization card and a couple others. All right. And there's a permanent resident alien card, which also does not need to be re-verified. And if anybody ever asks you why it doesn't need to be re-verified, the reason is because it's a permanent resident card. So that person is now a permanent resident. That's all we needed to know. We needed to know at one time. Okay. All right. I'm going to turn this back over to Claudia. She likes to talk about mistakes.
Having done a lot of I-9 audits, yes, I don't like doing them, but I'm okay talking about it. I do want to take a quick question. Somebody asked in the chat if there was a grace period for when you need to recertify after a document expires. No, nothing that I saw gave you a grace period. In fact, what I saw as I was preparing for this webinar was that best practice is to be monitoring those and notifying the employee like 60 days before their document's going to expire to give them time. Okay. So particularly as things are now, we're on a temporary work permit. There may be more, it may be harder to get that renewed. I would be notifying people as early as possible that you're going to need them to bring you a new document. Okay. 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 So some of the common mistakes as we've done I-9 audits, one of them is using an old version of the form. Now, in your file, you are going to have old versions of the form from an employee you hired, say, 4 years ago. That form will be different than the form you use today. But on whatever day you're completing the I-9, whatever I-9 you're using needs to be current. So the easiest way to do that is to download a new one every time you're doing a certification. The current form is dated 8/1/23, and I believe, and I apologize, I did not go back and actually look, believe it's good until like 2027. So it's good for it's good for a long time, and typically if they update it between now and then, they will still accept this one until the expiration date. Okay. Another mistake that organizations make, and thankfully I don't see this a lot, but I have seen it, and that's requiring employees to bring you specific documents. And otherwise, you tell the employee what documents they need to bring. Typically, it's driver's license and social security card, because those are easy, and because that's what 90% of your employees are going to bring you, are those two documents. But you cannot require an employee to bring you any specific document to complete the I-9. You may require them for other reasons, but you cannot require them for the I-9. It's the employee's choice. As long as it's an acceptable document on that list, it's up to them what they want to bring you. Another mistake is not completing Section 1 on day one. I'll be honest with you, when this law first came out, I totally misunderstood this requirement. So I completed a lot of I-9s not on day one, and the employee didn't complete it on day one. That is a requirement. Section 1 you do on day one, even if they don't bring their documents. Okay. Another mistake is that Section 1 isn't complete, or the employee didn't sign it. And Chris already mentioned that. You'd think it would be obvious, but yeah. But, yeah. We just got a question in chat. Can the I-9 be filled out ahead of time? Yes, it can be filled out ahead of time. So you can do it, but that you're then be thinking about, if you're making somebody come in to fill out this document ahead of time, are they working? And is that the, so people are not going to be happy if they have to make a trip in to bring you the documents when it's not required until day one. So I would think about that. But if you have someone come in for other reasons, yeah, there is no regulation that says you can't do them ahead of time. Okay, and then the last one, this isn't the last mistake. The last one on this slide is that the documents that you accept that should be in column A or column B and C are listed in the wrong column. Now, I know that sounds picky. It is picky, but when ICE does an audit, they are picky. So when you are listing those documents, they need to be in the right columns. Okay, Chris, let's go forward to the next one. Okay, another mistake is giving employees too long to bring in the documents. Chris already talked about the risk with that. In most cases, if they are getting replacement documents, then they will need to, what you can require is that they bring you a receipt. For example, if someone is requesting a replacement Social Security card, they can get a receipt that says they requested it. They can bring you that receipt. You can staple it to the I-9, and then you've got documentation that you have given the employee a chance to get the document. But on that receipt, it should have information about how long it will take to get that replacement Social Security card. And then you should be making sure you get that new card within that time frame. Don't forget about it. And with I-9s, like a lot of things, I think one tip is to keep a tickler if you have things that you need to recertify or somebody who hasn't brought a document, so you don't forget about them as things go on. Okay. Another mistake is that section on the employer verification is not filled in completely or unsigned. I can remember doing an audit where half of them did not have the start date for the employee. That's a critical piece of information, and it was not there. Sometimes they weren't signed by the person who's supposed to sign them, okay? And by the way, if you come across one that's not signed, you can't just stop and sign it, okay? Heidi, do we need to switch interpreters? I saw Tracy come on. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, so you want to make sure all the boxes in that section are filled out. If you audit your I-9s and you find one that has not been signed, if you're the person who does the I-9s, if you know you looked at the documents, then you could feel comfortable signing it. If you didn't, I would not sign it, because you are swearing under penalty of perjury on a federal document that you looked at the documents. So don't sign an old I-9 where nobody from the company has signed it. That is going to require you to ask the employee to bring the documents in again. That's unfortunate, but it's what you need to do. Okay. We already talked about that we're not allowed to accept expired documents. We also can't accept documents where the last names don't match. In fact, remember what Chris talked about with putting in what somebody's real name is and putting in their middle initial, that should match their documents. And if it doesn't, that's a question. There may be a perfectly reasonable explanation, but it may be something you have to fix. I had an employee one time who, when he went through immigration, they had misspelled his name. So we had a driver's license and a Social Security card that were one letter off, but they didn't match. So we worked with this employee because they did not know, they had been in this country for at least a year and had not gotten it fixed. And so we worked with them and helped them understand how to get that corrected so their documents would match, because it was going to follow them in employment forever if they had documents that didn't match. Okay. Another one which should be obvious is we can't accept documents that have obviously been tampered with. That's part of our due diligence. And then, of course, not updating temporary documents if we have temporary documents that expire. All of those are really common mistakes that we find on I-9s, even when we are auditing documents, auditing I-9s that have been completed by HR people that we know are experienced. You know, sometimes I know when I was doing orientations, sometimes I'd do them in a hurry, and then I would go back and audit them and find that I hadn't filled everything out completely because I was going to do it later, and then I forgot. So you want to make sure your I-9s are complete. Okay, Chris, can you take us to the next slide? Okay, so Formats for completing I-9s. You have choices. There's not one way you have to do them, with one exception. So paper and pen, if you're a small organization, you may still do it that way. That's perfectly legitimate. Some organizations do them electronically. That's also acceptable. And if you're fortunate to have an HRIS or a payroll system, some of those let you do them electronically in their system, and it will not let you do it incorrectly. So that's helpful if you've got an HR, if you've got a system like a payroll system that won't let you do them wrong. Okay. And then the other option is E-Verify, which is the government's plan, where you actually complete the form online, submit it to USCIS, and they immediately check it to make sure that they can match the information. Now, E-Verify, have always been some pluses and minuses. One of the big pluses right now, and by the way, some government employers, some government contractors have to do E-Verify. The nice thing about using E-Verify right now is that they are still allowed to view documents remotely. We were all allowed to do this during the pandemic, but that stopped. It's got to be almost 2 years ago now that it stopped. And if you are not doing E-Verify, you can no longer view documents remotely. What you have to do if you are not using E-Verify is if you hire remote employees, you have to appoint someone, a proxy, to view those documents. The good news is there's no rules about who that proxy is. It can be anybody. In fact, what I read is that it can even be a family member of the employee. I don't recommend that, by the way. I think that's a bad practice, but the law allows you to do this. A number of organizations, when we first had to switch to making sure somebody was viewing that document, we're using notary publics. You could use an attorney, but you can literally use anybody as your agent, but you have to appoint them as their agent. And you are still responsible to be sure that I-9's filled out correctly. So you want to make sure whoever you're using knows what they're doing. And then I would have them send the originals to me. You might be able to just do it electronically and get copies, but I would want the originals because I would want them. Okay. So have them sent to you. Okay. Okay. Which brings up a question of, do you keep copies of the documents that the employees provide to you for the I-9? The good news is USCIS lets you do either. So you can keep copies of the document, but you don't have to keep copies of the document. What you do need to do is be consistent. Whichever you choose to do, you want to do it for all employees. Don't just keep copies for some employers. I actually read a case where the employer was worried that maybe some of the people they'd hired who had temporary work permits might not be totally legal, so they were copying their documents, but not everybody else's. That's discrimination. You're not allowed to do it. So whatever you choose to do, just be consistent. And usually what I do is I copy the documents and I staple it to the I-9. I also know of a case with an organization that was a federal contractor. So they were audited. They've been audited for years. And they had one audit where there were mistakes on their I-9s, but they had the document copies. And the document copies showed that those documents were acceptable, and it kept them from getting fined. The really good news when you get audited is they're looking for compliance, but they're looking to see that you're making your best effort. You are doing what you need to do. That's what they're looking for. Yes, they will fine you for mistakes, particularly if you have a lot of them. But for this particular organization, when they had the documentation to support and to say that it was just an administrative error when it was wrong on the I-9 form, they didn't get fined. They got fined for other things, but they didn't get fined for that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so steps to take now. What do we recommend? If you have not done an I-9 audit, particularly if you've never done an I-9 audit, this is a good time to do one and check and make sure that they're correct. One suggestion from attorneys is that you consider involving legal counsel not necessarily to do the audit, but to work with you on the audit report about how are you going to fix whatever mistakes you find. The reason for that is that if you work with your attorney, that report then becomes protected under attorney-client privilege, where if you don't do it, it is discoverable. And if you are audited, they can ask for that document. So that's one thing to think about, particularly if you find a lot of errors on your I-9s, that might be something to consider. Remember that you have to have a completed I-9 for every employee that's been hired since November 6, 1986. So if you're auditing your I-9s and you come to one employee who doesn't have one, and they were hired in February of 1986, you do not have to have an I-9 for them, but you must have one for every employee who's been hired since then, who's still on your payroll. Okay. I would also encourage you, as you do that audit, to check for any expired documents you need to re-verify, and then make sure you do that. There is a full list of that on I-9 Central, which is on the USCIS website. We're going to give you that reference so you can find it. So check for that. But I think one of the other things is don't overreact. It's not time to panic. It's time to make sure your I-9s are correct and do your audit, but it's not time it's not time to panic. So even if you are audited, it's not time to panic. Go back through your I-9s, audit them, and make any corrections you need to do, okay? Because otherwise, if you overreact, it's possible that you'll do something discriminatory where you are treating people who are US citizens, for example, and people who are immigrants differently, which is going to be illegal. Okay, quick word about I-9 retention and how long you have to keep them. Again, you must have a current I-9 for every employee on your payroll. Okay, this is where it gets tricky and it is a little confusing. Your I-9s must be retained for 3 years from the employee's date of hire, or for 1 year after they terminate employment, whichever is longer. So what this means is you're going to keep an I-9 for every employee for at least 3 years. But if they're employed for you beyond that, 3 years or more, you're going to have to keep them for another year after they terminate. What I do when someone terminates is I pull their I-9, and right on the I-9, I write the date when I can destroy it. And I just calculate what's 3 dates from their date of hire, what's 1 date from their date of termination. I look at whichever one is further out in the future, and I cross out the other one, and then I put that I-9 in my tickler file, because your best practice is destroy I-9s that you don't need, because if they're still in there, they can be audited. And believe it or not, even though you don't have to have it, if it's wrong, you can be fined for that. So get rid of the ones you don't need, but make sure you keep the ones you do. And then we recommend you keep I-9 separate from personnel files. Number one, it's just easier to audit. If you've got them all together, you can then take just an employee list and go through really quickly to make sure you've got an I-9 for everybody, and look at everything else on the form to make sure it's correct. The other reason, however, is if you should have a surprise audit, and the chances are you won't. And the rule is in general that if you're going to be audited, you get 3 days notice. Now that's not a lot of time, particularly if you find mistakes on the I-9s where you have to see documents again. That 3 days is not going to give you a lot of time to do it. So if you are auditing and the I-9 is in the personnel file, you're going to have to go through and pull them all out. Okay. Particularly if you don't have a system for putting the documents in the same place in files, that's going to take forever, depending on how many employees you have. But the other thing is, if you were to get a surprise audit, and it's not likely, but if you were, they would be allowed, they would not have to wait while you pulled them out of the personnel files. They could ask to see the entire personnel file, and you don't want to do that. Okay. Correcting I-9. So you do your I-9 audit and you find mistakes. How do you correct it? I would encourage you, if you were doing your I-9 audit, I'm going to give you the basics, but I would encourage you to go back into the I-9 Central, and there's a whole section on how you correct I-9s to make sure you do them correctly. Number one rule is no whiteout. So do not white out information, even if it's incorrect, okay? Use a different color of ink than the color that the I-9 was originally completed in. So if it was completed in black, use blue. If the employee section's in blue and the employer section's in black, I would use purple or green or red, or it doesn't matter. I would use something different so it's clear that they're corrections. If there is incorrect information, you want to put a single line through it, not obliterate it. You want it to still be readable. So one single line through it, and then enter the correct information, date it, and initial it with your initials to show who made the change, okay? If you're doing those changes and you have an I-9 that has a lot of errors, so it's getting really hard to read, I would complete a new I-9, but you do not have to go back and have the employee, unless they didn't sign section 1, you don't have to go back and have them do that again. You don't have to have them re-sign. In most cases, it's going to be the employer section where you're going to be making these corrections. I would just do a new section 2, and then I would staple your new one to the original. And then above all, and Chris already said this, do not backdate. Okay, quick change back to Heidi. Okay, so if you are reviewing your I-9s and the employer section didn't get signed, so now somebody new has to check the documents and sign it, don't backdate it, okay? Do it the date you actually sign it. Could that result in a fine? Yeah, but it's more likely that it won't because you're being honest. And that's really, they would prefer to see that than to see something that might be backdated. So don't backdate. Okay, remember, you're signing that says something that under penalty of perjury, this is what I've done. I don't think it's a good idea to put something that's not correct. Okay. Okay, next slide, Chris. Okay, I said we'd give you some resources, and these are them. And somebody already put some of this in the chat, so thank you, whoever's doing that, whoever putting that stuff in there. It looked like there's quite some conversations going on in the chat. So I-9 Central, this is the URL to take you to the official site, and it's all there. It may take you a little bit of time digging to find it, which is why I gave you the second URL, which is for what's called the M274. That is the handbook for employers. And in it, there is a whole section on how to correct I-9s. So a whole section gives you pictures of what the documents look like. So if you get a document and you're not sure about it, you can go to the handbook, and there's a really good chance you'll be able to check and see, oh yeah, that's what it looks like. That's okay. So, yeah. Okay, I'm going to interrupt right here. Somebody asked in the chat, so make sure I understand, if an employee's been employed for more than 3 years, we should destroy the I-9 at 3 years? No. Remember, you have to have an I-9 for every employee that's still employed. You have to keep them for a full year after they terminate. So as long as somebody's still working for you, you must keep those I-9s. But if somebody worked for you for a year and then quit, then yes, at 3 years, you could throw that I-9 away, because that's been more than a year since their termination, and it's the full 3 years. You really, when I go through I-9s to figure this out, I really have to clear my head, because this is a little confusing. But just remember, it's the longer of the two, and you must have an I-9 for every employee that's still working for you. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Danielle, who's going to moderate our Q&A. I think we've been keeping up with them pretty well, but there may be some we haven't.
I do feel like we've been keeping up really well. So I've been putting the resources in the meeting chat for USCIS, the I-9, all things I-9, Claudia, that's me, I'm guilty. So Jody Rose has a conversation. You must have a form for every employee hired since 11/6/86. What do you do if you find you don't have one for someone?
Yeah, I've had that happen when I've gone back to do I-9s. In fact, I worked for an organization where somebody terminated. I pulled their I-9. I put it in their terminated folder because that's where I was keeping them at the time because I didn't have another place at the time. And then she came back like 6 months later. So I went to get her I-9. I could not find it. I know I pulled it. Sometimes I-9s just disappear. I think they're with the socks out of the dryer. I think they're on a beach in Cancun somewhere altogether. I can't explain it, but yes, that will happen. You got to do a new one. And it's a pain in the neck. The employee's not going to be happy to have to bring their documents back in, but you're gonna have to do one because you have to have one. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I would say in that case, Joey, you just do another one and take your lumps if you get audited
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But it just, you got to make sure you do have one. So if you find one that doesn't have it, there's no way to avoid the lump, right? So you're
Right.
gonna get it, but make sure you do have them because here again, if you're being honest, a lot of those guys will go, hey, okay, let's make
Yeah.
sure this doesn't happen again, and they'll let you slide sometimes.
Yeah.
There's another
I
question
see
about
that Andrea has a
electronic
question.
records.
Right.
You want to answer that one, Claudia?
Yeah, electronic records are fine. The electronic records are fine. They do accept electronic records. So I've run into a lot of employers that keep them that way. It's a little harder to audit because you still need to audit them unless you know you've got a system that doesn't allow you to make mistakes. And when I've been talking to people, that's not what people are telling me. I don't know why it couldn't be built that way. The system couldn't be built that way, but yeah. So yeah. I see that Jody has asked a follow-up question. So do you go get old documents if you didn't have an I-9 or do you use current ones? You're going to use current ones.
Mhm.
Now,
And then there's a
if
re-verification from Kelly Lee question.
actually, it's
Says
not
if
what
you-
re-verification is for. Okay, remember, most of the documents you're not going to re-verify. You're not going to re-verify an expired driver's license. You're not going to re-verify an expired passport. Good thing is Social Security cards don't expire, but you don't have to re-verify those. No, if you don't have an I-9, that's not a re-verification. You got to start over because you don't have an I-9. So you got nothing. Think about it. You're supposed to attach the re-verification form to the I-9. You've got nothing to attach it to because there's nothing there.
And always current docs.
Yep.
And you'd mark
What
the
do you
first
mark it to
day
first
is the first day they worked.
day? Yep.
So I say you might take your
That's why
lumps on
Chris
that, but
Yeah, that's why Chris says you may take your lumps because obviously you didn't complete section 1 on day 1 and you didn't complete section 2 on the third day. If whiteout is used, you need to start a new I-9. Oh boy, that's a good question. And I
Ooh.
don't know that I have an answer to that. Oh boy. Thank you. You have stumped us. If it were me, I would be inclined to do a new one and then attach it to the old one to show, but I wouldn't make the employee come back unless it was the employee's information that was whited out. If it's just the employer information, then yes, I would do a new I-9, but just the section. I don't have to do a complete new I-9. I would just do the section that has the whiteout. If you've got whiteout everywhere, then yeah, you're probably going to need to do a new one.
Andreas, your hand is still up. Did you get your question answered?
No, okay.
Oh, hi, this is Andrea. I wanted to ask about name changes
All right.
and especially we are in a space where we have some trans employees
Mhm.
who have done a name change,
Right.
and will bring in their driver's license and their
Mhm.
birth certificate and the official name
Right.
change document. How do we document that?
Well, if it's a new employee, you're going to put it in the new name. Okay. Because if it's a new employee, then there's no name change because you're putting them in under their new name. If it's an employee who's already working for you, then you need to do, and I don't know why, I'll be honest, I don't know whether it would be a re-verification, but you do need to complete a new employer section with the new name and attach the document that shows their name change to it. Okay,
Okay, so
yeah,
actually my question is like, okay, I have a new employee and they come in and they show me their driver's license
which is
and
in
they
their
show
old
me,
name,
huh?
which
With
is
their
in their
new
old,
name,
okay,
with their real name, with their current name that they've changed it to.
okay,
But but because of the government, they can't change the name on their birth certificate at this point. And so the names don't match.
okay,
However,
yes,
they do have a legal
yes,
name change
yeah,
document. How do is the onus on us to like scan the documents, or do we just say no, we figured out that this works right? Or
yeah,
yes, I've
yeah,
seen the birth certificate. It doesn't have the same name. What I've
right,
seen is the birth certificate in conjunction with the
right,
second document.
yeah.
How do I document that, or do I need to?
Okay, yes, you need to document it because you're going to have an I-9 with with documents with two different names. This is one of the places where keeping copies of the documents would be really helpful. And you're going to need it anyway because you're going to need to have it. Yeah, you know, it's interesting that I don't know why somebody wouldn't bring you their social security card unless they haven't changed
Well,
that.
not everyone has changed their social security
Yeah,
card,
I
and
know.
the government has blocked that right now.
Right,
So like my kid is trans, and his social security card has his dead name on it, and he is
right.
unable to change it.
Yeah, so I would document that on the I-9 form. You can write notes on it. There's no reason you can't write. And you could write a note where you accepted the birth certificate and the wrong name to say also accepted copy of court order changing their name. So that you
So-
have, yeah, you have documentation. What you can't accept is somebody's word for it. You have to have a document that, yeah, typically a
So
court order. Yeah.
I
Margaret,
had
you-
to, but if I could, I had to go through this and actually assist a client in going through this as well. And it is, the legal name change is appropriate. You do not need any additional documentation to
Right.
confirm that this individual had a legal name change. So birth certificate is not necessary. Social security card is not necessary. The legal document that says one has attested that one's name has changed and they give you everything official, that is fine. I just looked on the SHRM website and they said changing the name in section 3 is a good idea.
Yeah.
Correcting the name on section 3. And then I would also keep the name change document
Yep.
along with the other documentation there, such that one, we verified their identity, their ability to work, and we've also verified their name change. So I've got all three of those pieces together in one section.
Thank you.
Okay. Somebody asked a question about E-Verify and said, is it correct that it cannot be used for independent contractors? You don't need to verify. You do not do an I-9 on independent contractors. They're independent. They're not employees. You only do an I-9 for employees.
Jorge, do you have a question?
Yeah,
Yes, and you need to do a W-9, correct?
this question has a little bit to do about like, signatures and electronic filing. So I think like the federal government has a website where you can like type in information, whether it be like in section 1 or section 2. And,
Mhm.
you know, if someone chooses to go that route, then the signature could be, you know, typed in with the same font as everything else. And I see a signature as kind of like a fingerprint. It's unique, you know, in itself. And like, do auditors care if like the signature is like, you know, typed in, whether it be in section 1 or section 2 or whatever, or should that be printed out and signed by the employee and then later signed by the employer?
Unless you're using a system that allows for that. For example, things like DocuSign, or I've done, I'm trying to think of what I've done. I've done some contracts where I signed them electronically, and I had to verify that I was okay and that it was me signing them electronically. So I would probably print them out and have them sign it. Unless in some way, shape, or form, whatever you're using has that ability to that. Well, okay, think about when you do your taxes. You can file your taxes electronically, but you have to go through the IRS to be authorized to do that. So they know that the person that's signing electronically is actually the person who it is an income tax refund for. So there needs to be something other than just, I'm going to type my name in. Just typing a name in, I would not think would do it. But I have never encountered that in person, so I don't know how they would react.
Thank you.
Okay. Wesley has a question. If you view the employee documents remotely, what is the risk?
Well, number one is that you're signing a document that says you're signing the form that says you saw them and you didn't. So you have lied on a federal document. I don't think that's a good idea. Your risk is you get caught and you're charged with perjury. It's much cheaper to get a proxy to view the documents and fill out the form.
Little pain up front and less pain on the
Yep.
back end.
And if you're thinking that we were allowed to do that at one point in time, Wesley, we were.
We were.
We
Yeah.
were. It during COVID, we were allowed to do that, and it has changed. And I know at many of my clients, I'm looking at a few of them here. I've gone and I've done the whole audit because we did so many verifications remotely during COVID.
And remember, by the way, that if you did verifications remotely during COVID, you are by now supposed to have gone back and corrected all of those and actually viewed the documents in person. And
It's
the
super
deadline to
fun.
do that is way gone.
Super fun.
Great time. Is that all you have for questions?
Chris, will you put up the slide for me with the information from VSHSL? I see Andrea's hand popped up. I'm also going to share the slide in front of you. We are currently housing the King County Wage and Benefit Survey. And there's no cost to participate, and participants that fill out their information also receive the copy of that survey back first. Third year, 501 Commons has hosted this. We would really just appreciate your participation. It helps us know how to put our people first, right? We want to know how you're compensating your people. What are their job duties? What are their titles? What does this look like? If you have any questions specific to that, direct them to me. And then I can see Andrea has a hand up and there's another question in the chat. So Andrea, I'll give you the time and then get to the chat.
Thank you very much. This is Andrea. Margaret, may I share our experience with doing remote I-9 verification. Our organization has hired some remote employees. And we did have the guidance from US IC. Are we
CIS, yeah.
ICS right now? Yeah, CIS. Is that you can go to a notary public and have them take
Yeah.
care of this.
Yeah.
The thing is, they didn't tell the notary publics that this is something to expect, which means they don't really have a lot of guidance on it. Because we had some struggles, and we know that in our organization we will have more remote hires that we may not want to have travel into our actual main office. We've written out some guidelines and guidelines. So I'm gonna volunteer Margaret to share with her colleagues what we found and how we've addressed this. And I'm hoping this also addresses the questions about how would they know if they viewed the documents, if you viewed the documents remotely, if you have a policy of not keeping copies of the documents. Well, I mean, honestly,
Oh, I got an answer to that one.
y'all, I mean, they, even if they, like, they might not, but why would you risk it? That is our
Yeah.
way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And we did have one hire who was in an area where our executive director knew the principal of a school.
Mhm.
So we just had that. We said, "Hey, can we have our new hire come in and you just do this?" And the principal was like, she was like, "I don't know how to do this." So I talked her through what she needed to do, and she did it for us.
Mhm.
You can have somebody, you can have your bestie do it if they live in the area.
Yep.
It's, the problem is not who you get, it is how well you tell them what you need done.
Yep.
So
And
I
one of
just
the-
wanted to
yeah,
share our
absolutely.
experience with you guys.
And I'm happy to share that with my colleagues, shared with Danielle. And one of the things that I think was wonderful about how HSTC approached it, and this is Margaret, is that they wanted to make it as easy as possible for the new employee.
Yep.
So once we realized that it was not as easy as we thought it should be, we put together all the information and the things that we had learned. And when I say we, I mean Andrea. So we put together all the things that we needed for them to know in order to make it easier for them and make their first days at onboarding at the Hearing, Speech, and Deaf Center as simple as possible.
Yep.
So we learned.
Yeah, and
Yep.
and now that we had that experience, we want to share it with everyone so that you guys don't have to go through that.
Excellent. Okay. Okay. I do have an answer to the person who said, how will they even know if we don't keep copies of documents? If I were an auditor, I'm going to look at the employee's address. I'm going to look at your company's address. And then I'm going to go, oh, the employee's in Tennessee and you're in Washington. How did you view those documents? And yeah, that would be one of the first things I would look at if I were an auditor, is I'd look, and I think that's so obvious that it then puts you in the position of having to choose to lie or admit that you didn't really look at the documents. Again, don't think it's worth it. Danielle, you're muted.
I was going to say, I don't see any hands up, and I see a couple people dropping out of the meeting. So what we'll do at this point is we have the recording. It's hard to share the recording. If you would like a copy of it, we can share it to you. However, we will share slides. And then if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. You can reach out to Claudia, Chris, Margaret, and I. If you're going through the quick consult line, that is the pleasure of Margaret. So whatever we can do for you, genuinely call on us. Let us know how we can help you. Oh, Jorge has one more question at the bottom. When filling in section 2, list A, B, C, are acronyms acceptable?
I certainly use them.
Like if you put
So-
SS card instead of social security card, or yeah, that's
I
fine.
don't
As
think
long
I've
as
ever
it's-
written driver's license instead of DL in my life. So,
Yeah, I don't think I've ever done it either.
yeah.
I think as long as they're standard abbreviations, it'd be okay. If it's something unusual, I would probably write it out. But if I were going to put birth certificate, I'd put birth cert.
Agreed.
Yep.
Okay. Anything to add, Chris, Claudia?
No, thank you all for
Not really.
joining today.
Yeah.
It was our pleasure.
Thanks for the questions.
Wonderful.
Lots of really good questions.
Okay, so if you would like a copy for your ED, I see a couple of emails popping in there. Usually takes my tech team about a day to convert the recording, and we'll get it out to you. And again, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you as clients, past and present. And again, we hope in the future, we appreciate you. Please call on us. Let us know how we can help.
Thank you, interpreters.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like there's 7 of us left. So let's see.
6.
Chris, will you pull down the slide? Okay. Thank you so much. You guys are amazing. I see we have a note taker still on, and maybe Stephanie Soto. Okay. Thank you. I felt like that was a really great seminar, really great information. It was really interesting. One of the things that we were talking about and doing documentation with name changes, and this was the one. I don't know, Claudia, if you told me to go or somebody told me to go to the Sherman one recently, and when I was in attendance, they said, think of it like somebody's getting married. Right. So
all it is.
it's the exact same process.
Exactly.
Right? So if somebody got married, all you have to do is bring in that form and
Yep.
attach it, and you're good to go. So even if the person was there and they have their driver's license and it was their dead name, but they've come in
Yes.
again and they said, yep, right, here's
Well,
this.
you know what?
And
Margaret Farber was is my dead name,
Mm,
but I
yeah.
did not need to.
I sometimes miss the initials.
I know, that was really my sadness for you. I thought about that a lot. Because I didn't
You didn't think about anybody else but yourself.
I know,
Oh.
selfish. Well, Chris, I always think about you. I just didn't care enough. Hey, not to keep that last name, Chris. I could change my little